Welcome to Things You Don't Know.
When we think about traffic lights, we think about routine. Red means stop, green means go, and yellow means prepare or use caution. It feels universal, almost natural.
But nothing about traffic lights is natural. They're inventions, contested ones, political ones, and at times deeply human ones.
Tonight, we're telling the story of how traffic lights emerged, not just as machines, but as tools for order, power, safety, and sometimes social trust. This is things you don't know.
Yes, it is. Now, let's talk about where the traffic light begins. The traffic light begins not with cars, but with chaos. By the mid 19th century, cities like London and Paris were drowning in movement. Horse drawn carriages, omnibuses, cars, carts, pedestrians, and street vendors all competing for the same narrow space. Accidents were common, injuries were routine, and deaths frequent, but largely accepted as the price of urban life. The first attempt at a traffic signal appeared in London in 1868 near the Houses of Parliament. It wasn't electric, it was gaslit, and it was operated manually by a police officer. Red and green lamps told carriage drivers when to stop or go. Within weeks, it exploded, literally. The device was abandoned, and for decades afterward, the idea of signaling traffic seemed dangerous, impractical, and even absurd. Cities relied instead on police officers, human signals standing at intersections, using gestures, whistles, and sheer authority to direct traffic. What's important here is not the failure, but the instinct behind it, the belief that movement could be regulated. By the early 20th century, automobiles changed everything. Cars were faster, heavier, and less forgiving than horses. But accidents skyrocketed, and unlike carriage crashes, car crashes often killed people instantly. Cities faced a new question: who gets the right of way? Traffic lights emerged as an answer, not really technical, but moral. They were meant to remove judgment from the moment in conflict. No arguing with another driver, no guessing intent. The light decides. But that raises another issue. Who programs the light?
Street lights are a language, and like all languages, they had to be agreed upon. Early signals varied widely. Some used bells, ding ding. Others used words, stop. Others relied on shapes or hand signals. Even colors weren't standardized at first, but eventually red, yellow, and green prevailed. Why those colors? Well, railroads already used them. Railroads were the first large scale systems where timing, distance, and human life intersected at speed. Red meant danger, green meant clear, yellow or amber meant caution. When cities borrowed these colors, they were borrowing the authority of industrial discipline. Traffic lights trained drivers to obey machines. This was not universally welcomed. In the 1910s and 1920s, many drivers, especially wealthy early car owners, resented traffic lights. They saw them as insults, as constraints meant, for the other people, those lower class. But the lights didn't care who you were. That was the quiet revolution. Traffic lights imposed equality at intersections. Everyone stopped. Everyone waited. Everyone submitted to the same signal, regardless of class, profession, or urgency, except for ambulances and some other things. In practice, traffic lights also became tools of control. Cities used timing to favor downtown commerce. Suburban commuters or industrial traffic, neighborhoods were divided by signal placement. Pedestrian crossings were added or withheld based on whose movement mattered. A traffic light is neutral only on the surface. Beneath it is policy.
Now let's look at the idea of discipline and the human cost. Traffic lights are often described as making cities safer, and that is true statistically. But safer for whom? Early traffic systems were designed for able bodied adults moving at predictable speeds, pedestrians who move slowly, children, the elderly, people with disabilities were often treated as obstacles rather than users. Crosswalk timers assumed a standard walking pace. If you couldn't meet it, the system didn't adapt. You did, or you didn't cross. That tells us something very important and not so positive about modern society. We often define order by efficiency, not inclusion. Traffic lights also shape behavior psychologically. They taught patience, they trained obedience, they normalized waiting even when no danger was visible. That matters, ladies and gentlemen, because once people accept that waiting is normal, they also accept that authority doesn't need to explain itself. The light doesn't justify, it doesn't negotiate, it commands. And yet, traffic lights also created trust. You stop because you believe others will stop too. You enter the intersection believing the system will hold. That shared belief, fragile, invisible, is one of the foundations of modern civic life. Traffic lights are not just about cars, they are perhaps the embodiment of our faith in strangers.
Absolutely, Dr. Tanine. And traffic lights seem kind of mundane because they work. We notice them only when they fail.
But behind every light is a history of conflict, compromise, and control.
They remind us that order isn't natural, it's built. And like all things built by imperfect humans, it reflects our values, both our best intentions and our blind spots.
And there's one moment in the 20th century where the traffic light stopped being nearly a tool of order and became a battlefield of ideology.
During China's Cultural Revolution, symbols mattered more than systems. Words, colors, gestures, nothing was neutral. Everything carried political meaning.
And for some extremist factions among Mao's Red Guard, that included, I'm not joking, folks, even traffic lights. Red already meant revolution. Red meant correctness. Red meant loyalty to the great helmsman, Chairman Mao. So the idea that red meant stop was politically and culturally intolerable.
In several cities, Red Guard groups demanded that the meanings be reversed. Red should mean go, green associated with permission, calm, and in some readings, bourgeois order should mean stop. It sounds absurd, but actually, it wasn't a theater. It was deadly serious.
This wasn't about traffic efficiency. It was about asserting that ideology outranked convention, safety, and even logic. If the revolution demanded it, the world, including machines, had to obey.
And for a brief moment, the system cracked. Drivers didn't know which rules applied. Pedestrians hesitated. Police were sidelined or even denounced and put in prison camps. The traffic light, designed to eliminate ambiguity and ensure safety, became a source of fear. Eventually, the state itself, including Prime Minister Zhou Enlai, intervened. Practicality won. Red went back to meaning stop. But the episode reveals something very unsettling.
Traffic lights only work when everyone is in agreement on what they mean.
And when ideology replaces shared meaning, even the simplest systems collapse.
A traffic light doesn't just regulate movement, folks. It encodes trust. When that trust is broken, when symbols are weaponized, order dissolves fast. The intersection becomes a mirror of the society around it. We could continue talking about this for some time, but I think you've gotten the main framework of what we're trying to say here. I hope you've enjoyed it, ladies and gentlemen. Bye for now.